Good evening, everybody. As Scott mentioned, my name's Trip Walt. I'm a staff attorney with APSRC. Great to be with you tonight. I'll be taking you through the next two sections of our presentation on board governance and school choice. So the first thing we're going to talk about, as Scott mentioned, are the board training requirements. Here are the duties of your superintendent as far as they go with board training. Something I wanted to mention to you right off, the second bullet point on this slide, is your January board meeting every year now has increased importance because it's at that meeting that the superintendent is going to give the board its report of hours from the previous year. And we'll see in just a minute why that's very critically important to you. Here's just an example of what a form that your superintendent may use to track your hours. So we get to the January board meeting, and let's say you have not obtained all your hours for the previous year. So the board training requirements we have are that you have to get, if you're a new board member, which means that you've either been elected to or appointed to your board this year in 2023, you have up until no later than December 31st of next year to get at least 9 board training hours. If you're a veteran board member, that is, you started your board service last year or before, then you have to get at least 6 hours every calendar year. So you'll have until December 31st of this year to get at least 6 hours in. You do need to know that APSRC is an approved provider by DESE, so all the hours that you receive from us do count towards your requirements. Ken Rich, who you'll hear from in a little bit, our finance director, kind of heads up our board training program here. So if you're getting close to the end of the year and you're lacking hours, then you or your superintendent can reach out to Ken and he can work with you, come up with a way for you to stay in good shape on your hours. So let's say we go to the January meeting, next January's meeting, and you don't have the required hours. So at this point you would be what I like to call suspended, because the law says, and we've got on the slide, that you can't do anything as a board member. You can't vote, participate in any board business. The only thing you can do is get your delinquent hours completed. And as you see on the next 2 bullet points there, that you have a window that extends from January 1st until no more than 30 days after the date of your January meeting to get your hours completed. The only exception to that, and the last bullet point, is if you have a serious medical condition that can be verified by a written statement from a doctor, or if you were involved in military service, then that extension would go till next December 31st for this past year's hours to be completed. Otherwise, you just have that time period. So what happens if we get to the January meeting, you're delinquent in your hours, and you have the time we just talked about to get them completed, and you still don't complete them? Then what the law provides is that you're out. You're gone. At that point, the remaining board members declare a vacancy, and your position will have to be filled by someone else. So again, very, very important to get your hours on a timely basis, and please reach out to us for help if you need it. Good news is, if you're in the fortunate position of getting more hours than you need, then those get carried forward from year to year. And specifically, DESE has a set of rules on this, and what they say is that your excess hours can be carried over for no more than 3 calendar years from the year that you receive them. So let's say this year you accumulate more hours than you need, then those are potentially good up through December 31st of 2026. All right, now we're going to get into the board governance and responsibilities piece for our presentation tonight. And so what I usually like to refer to this section, is staying in your lane. And please understand that's not meant to be disrespectful to any of you, whether you're board members or superintendents. It isn't precipitated by anything we've heard about any particular board or superintendent. It's just a way we've come up with to kind of package, if you will, or group the various responsibilities that each side, and I say each side because governance of a school district is a shared thing. So first of all, let's talk about some of the ways that you lead your district. Defining the district's mission and direction, adopting academic standards and expected outcomes, approving curriculum and course offerings, and enacting, reviewing, and amending policies. Now, those are things that I was able to read through pretty quickly, but in reality, as all of you know, these are very time-consuming yet essential functions. I say time-consuming because if you're going to do it right, each of these things takes up a lot of your time, requires a lot of preparation. One of the things out of there that you may be especially familiar with, or more recently dealt with, I should say, is the last bullet point, enacting, reviewing, and amending policies. Probably in the early summer or thereabouts, both the board and the superintendent spent a fair amount of time going over possible policy changes or additions to be put in place for this current school year. So things that had to be changed due to law changes, updates that had to be made to your certified and personnel and classified personnel policies, student handbooks, etc. Another way a board leads the district and is in a personnel role, and the question I always ask here is, how many employees do you have? How many employees directly report to the board and the board has authority over? The answer to that for years was 1. Now, due to the law change from this legislative session, it's potentially 2 or more. And so what do I mean by that? You still have direct responsibility for the superintendent, but now due to that law change, you also have direct oversight of assistant superintendents as well. But the key point of this here is that those are the people that you directly supervise. Okay? If you look at the third bullet point, we've highlighted the first word for a reason. With the rest of the district's employees, then you approve the hiring of those individuals based on the recommendation that your superintendent brings to you. So I'm also setting up a discussion we're going to have in a minute by talking about how many employees you have and the direct authority you have over a certain select group of district employees. Money. Ken is obviously, and Jim are going to get into this in more detail with you, but the big thing I want to emphasize here, I guess a couple things I want to emphasize, and I'll leave the bullet points to your reading. That's all the different parts of the money piece. But of the various important and essential duties that you have as board members, my personal opinion is your role in doing the things we've listed here as far as finance are among your most important. Because obviously you've got to have solid finances, you've got to have adequate money to work with to provide for your students, provide the educational experience for them, all that entails, paying for teaching staff, your other staff, facilities, programs, etc. That all gets down to money. So it's especially important that that's done right, and I think especially important in your oversight and monitoring role that you are keeping track of that. One thing I don't want to get lost in that discussion, though, is where are you going to get that information from? Well, that's going to come from your superintendent, perhaps a chief finance officer or business manager, perhaps an assistant superintendent's going to be in the mix. So you've got folks that are going to lead that discussion for you and put that and give you the information you need to help you in making the decisions you have to make here. Disputes. Now this is one of the main reasons I kind of camped out on that slide a little bit ago to talk about how many employees you have. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an exaggerated example of how this can come into play for you. So I'm going to pretend that I'm a board member in your district. And I'm out, let's say, in your community, and let's say I'm at the grocery store. And I'm at the grocery store just minding my own business. All of a sudden, patron of the district comes up to me, stops me. Oh, hey, wait a minute. You're Trip Walter, aren't you? Yes. Yeah, you're the board member from Zone 7, right? Yes, I am. Oh, my lucky day, not yours, but mine. Because I need you to stop what you're doing right now. You can finish up your shopping in a little bit, but I've got some stuff to talk to you about, my friend. First of all, let me start with my daughter. My daughter, who probably is the best teacher that's ever taught. I mean, just amazing. But for some reason, the raving idiot you've got as a principal at the high school where she teaches will not let up on her one bit. She can't do anything right. She's a stellar teacher, a role model. And every day I have to hear all the stuff that no good, dumb as a stump principal is doing to make her life holy heck. And I am tired of it. And don't tell me to go down there and talk to that person. My gosh, Air has an higher IQ than that principal of yours. Don't tell me to do that. It's just going to be a waste of time. Nothing's going to happen. But you, my board member, the person I voted for, this is what you do, right? You're the person that when we have problems with the district, we're counting on you to step in the breach. We're counting on you to go there and do that, okay? So I want you, first thing tomorrow, to march down to school. You talk to that principal, you talk to that superintendent, you talk to anybody you have to and get this straightened out for me. Oh, and by the way, while you're at the school, my granddaughter, my daughter's daughter, she's an elementary school student, and her life's as bad as my daughter's. The principal there is just absolutely horrendous. My granddaughter's an angel child. I mean, I think she's going to be a nuclear physicist someday. She's going to be a leader. There's no doubt about it. But you can't prove it to her teacher over there. You cannot prove it to that teacher who continually rides my granddaughter. She can't do anything right. Her homework's wrong. She can't get test questions right. And believe me, it's no fault of hers. Let me tell you that right now. So, while you're at the school, get a hold of the teacher, get a hold of the principal there, and I say get a hold of the superintendent, whomever you have to do to get this straight. Oh, and get back with me when you finished, okay? I don't want you to say, yeah, I'll take care of it, and you don't. Okay, you've got your marching orders. Good to see you. Take care of it and let me know. I've come to realize over the years that a fair amount of you get in somewhat similar situations, and obviously that was a bit over the top. Hopefully it was, but I wanted to make a point, okay? So as I see it, if you're faced with that kind of situation, there are one of three roads you can go down, so to speak. You can say, yeah, you know what? You're right. That is, I'm a school board member. Yeah, I can go down there and yeah, I'll be glad to. I'll be glad to do that because this is horrible. This cannot go on in my district. I'm going to take care of it. So that's option one. Option two is, yeah, I see what you're saying, but you know what? I think what I'll just do is I'll just go down and talk to the superintendent, and I'll give the information to the superintendent and let the superintendent take care of it. Option three, which is the one I'd hope you'd say, is, okay, you know, that's really not something that I have control over. Those things fall to the superintendent, and you need, if you wish, to go down and talk to the superintendent yourself. And I'm sure if you do that, the superintendent will look into it and do whatever he or she can to assist you with that situation. Now, hopefully you've realized, for a lot of the reasons I have on this slide, that one, the first option is one you should not take. Now, I've heard over the years that some board members like option 2 because it gives them the ability to tell the complaining citizen or patron that they've actually done something. I do not recommend doing number 2 for what I'm about to talk to you about on this slide. Number 3, I think, is far and away the preferred choice. And additional reason for that is this, is let's say you get personally involved, and let's say you take it upon yourself to try and resolve this problem. So what happens if the teacher in question, let's say, is subject to disciplinary action and is subject to recommendation for termination, and his case comes all the way up to you for a board hearing? Or you get involved with a situation involving the student, and you already know about the student, and you've gotten too personally involved about this student because it's a relative of yours or friend has told you about the problem, wanting you to take care of it, and the student's recommended for expulsion, and that comes to you on a hearing. So are you going to be able to make an unbiased decision? It's going to be very hard for you, isn't it? And the thing I want to emphasize here too is if you put yourself in that position and it comes to these hearings, that kind of radiates out in a bad way. It makes you look bad. At a minimum, you have to step down, or should step down, right? Recuse yourself, not be any part of these hearings because you are biased, right? You've already heard one side of the story. To me, that radiates in a negative way to the board and the district as a whole. And I know that's something you don't want to do. You don't want to put anybody in a compromising situation. But if you get asked by the employee, or you get asked by an attorney representing employee or student, as the case may be, anybody know about this case? Well, you've got 2 options, right? You can either say the right thing, yes I do, I won't be participating in this, or you can try and bluff it and see if you get by with it. But anyway, no good options other than the one I mentioned. Okay, so what's the superintendent side of everything? The superintendent manages the district by providing positive leadership. So one example I like to throw in here is if you were a private business, then the superintendent would be your CEO or executive director. He or she's the person that's on the ground, so to speak, in your district, handling the day-to-day operations, making sure that the mission and direction that you've come up with, you've defined, is being carried out. The policies we talked about that you adopted are they're being handled the way they should be. He or she is the primary decision maker for day-to-day operations and will be making the staff decisions and making hire and fire recommendations to you. So to sum it up, we've put these in columns. There's about 7, I think, examples on each side as to the various ways that you govern and your superintendent govern in a collaborative fashion. Now I'm going to go through a few acts with you. Act 418, if you've been on your board for a while, you probably remember that up until this last legislative session, there's been a requirement that if you're going to raise a person's salary by at least 5%, that's something that the board had to specially approve. Now that requirement no longer exists. Act 14 repealed that. Here's something that's kind of interesting, another law from the session, 745. So if you have a group of employees at your district that has the same grievance, it has the same subject, same concern, now the law provides, and your policy should now provide, that that group of potential grievance can kind of band together into one group. They can select one person, one or more, to be a spokesperson, and that person can present the grievance on behalf of the group to the board, and the board can consider it as a group. Short comment on 656 is now there are no more things as reduced price lunches. If you have students that qualify for reduced price lunches, or up until now would, then they're going to be converted to free breakfast and lunch, because you're going to be required to use your federal child nutrition program funds to do that. Reduction in force. Briefly here, if you've been around your district for a while, you probably are familiar with reduction in force, or at least what the policy looks like, even if you've never had to hopefully implement it. Up until now, it was strongly seniority based. Okay? What Act 780 has done has laid out criteria that your RIF policy now has to include into several different areas. So it's not just a seniority or primarily seniority based. Act 782, dealing with classified personnel policy or PPC changes. A couple of the highlights there is we no longer have the separate groups of categories from which PPC members can be drawn from. If you see on the slide there that you also now, a board has the ability to appoint a non-management classified employee in order to fill a vacancy on the PPC. It also provides for the possibility of somebody who's providing contracted services to you to possibly be a member of the PPC. Ethics standards for board members, I won't go over. Act 83 is something that Scott talked to you about in the FOIA section.